I was drafted. I volunteered for the draft.
Would you care to explain?
I had dropped out of school a few times. The second time I had dropped out, I knew the selective service would probably be looking for me, so I called up my local draft board and told them I'm ready to go anytime you send me the letter.
And where were you living at the time?
Hartford, Connecticut.
Now, do you recall the date or at least the year that you enlisted?
It was November 2nd, 1966.
Now, why did you select that particular branch of service? Over the Army, over the Navy, or the Air Force?
I didn't really select the Army. I was drafted and I ended up in the Army. I do remember when I was going through my physical in New Haven, they lined us all up and somebody was coming down the line pointing to different people saying, "You're going to be a Marine." And I was just hoping when they got to me that I wasn't going to be a Marine. That's how I ended up in the Army.
So, would you care to tell me about your first days in service?
We left New Haven and I think we were bused down to New York City, and we spent the night in a place called the Seamen's Institute, which I think was an old Navy place. And then from there we flew down to Fort Jackson in South Carolina, where we had basic training. We spent 8 weeks down in Fort Jackson. And then from Fort Jackson, at the end of basic training, the drill sergeants were reading the orders as to where everybody was going to be sent. And when they got to me, they said I was going to be an imagery interpreter, and I was going to Fort Holabird in Maryland. And I asked the drill sergeant what exactly is an imagery interpreter. He had no idea.
So what were any kind of predicating requirements or skills that you had that put you in that position?
None that I'm aware of. When you first go into the service, they gave you a battery of tests and basic training. And they ranged from Morse code to mechanical to, I guess, math, and I'm assuming it had something to do with general intelligence, and they just picked me for that.
Now, what was your basic training like? I mean, it sounds like you would have been training in December.
Basic training, I didn't think it was that difficult. What I found interesting down in South Carolina at the time is early in the morning you were wearing a heavy field jacket because it was very cold, and you'd run around all day and you'd be sweating, and then during the rest of the day you'd be sweating very profusely, and then if you still were out in the field by the time the sun got down, you started freezing again. What I did I guess not enjoy was the punishment that was meted out if somebody in your platoon or company did something wrong. The barracks were built on little stilts over sand, and they made you crawl underneath those things back and forth until the drill sergeants were happy. So you ate a lot of sand.
And do you recall any of your instructors by name? Or?
There was a Sergeant Black. There was a Sergeant Dean. And the interesting thing is, when I was in Vietnam, I met up with Sergeant Black again. I was at an EM club having a drink, an adult libation. And sitting across the bar, I recognized one of my sergeants, and I bought the guy a drink, sent it over. And he came over and said he wanted to know, who had bought him the drink, and I explained to him I had him in as one of my drill instructors, and it's nice meeting him again. He unfortunately was out in the field. And, I wasn't. And those are the only two that I can really remember.
How did you get through basic training, physically, mentally?
physically fine, mentally fine. My father had been a veteran in World War II, and I didn't want to embarrass myself in not being able to finish. But I thought it was relatively easy. We didn't have a lot of long hikes. We spent a week in bivouac, and they trucked us out there and trucked us back, so we didn't have to walk. So I found basic relatively easy and enjoyable.
Now, what was your secondary training like in Maryland?
That was for photo interpreting, and that was a 13-week course. And it was heavily in math the first couple of weeks. And what's interesting is we started off with multiplication and division. And we had people dropping out at that stage, and worked our way up through trigonometry, because a lot of the photo interpreting had to do with measuring, and if you use different angles, you could tell how tall something was. And then you moved from the math part into actually looking at photographs and interpreting them. What they had in photo interpreting was what they called keys, and they were books of photographs, for example, Russian tanks. And by looking at specific characteristics of a tank, you could identify what type of tank it was. So they had a lot of that stuff for Southeast Asia. You could look at different types of trees and you could identify trees. So that's basically what that was.
Do you recall anything particularly useful from that you applied in Vietnam?
I think the keys were for interpreting. If you happen, and most of those keys, I think, were probably developed for Europe, where you'd have more of a land war with mechanized tanks and armored personnel carriers, artillery pieces. Once you got to Vietnam, you didn't see any of that stuff in the South. You might have seen it in the North. But most of what we were looking at in the South wasn't heavy enemy equipment.
So what were your first impressions when you of military life?
I enjoyed it, actually. Again, I dropped out of school a couple times and really had no direction in life. And I found it interesting. I found it particularly interesting once I got overseas. I thought it was a good adventure.
Can you describe a typical day in uniform?
Overseas or in Vietnam?
How about both? Sir?
Well, once I got to Fort Holabird, for the first month or two, we were waiting to get into a class, so they would give us an assignment. And I remember working in a bookbinding factory, I guess. They were making manuals, and I'd be there, and I'd be stapling them together. I also remember working in putting up shelving, and those are the only two jobs I remember there. But Fort Holabird was a very small fort. You could walk off the fort in like 5 minutes. So you'd get up at 7 o'clock, have breakfast, and do your job until 4 or 5 o'clock, and then you'd have the rest of the evening to yourself. And then once classes started, it was a Monday through Friday class, and I think it was probably from 8 to 3 or 8 to 4 that you were going to class.
Did it feel like being in university again?
It did. And the fort was very nice. You had a theater, and it was a nice little fort. And at night, you could get a pass. You can go into Baltimore because you were right in Baltimore. So it was like having, going to school and being a college kid again, with no worries about grades, I guess. The only thing you had to worry about was passing your tests so that you wouldn't get bounced out and end up who knows where. What I did find interesting, because I'd never seen this before, was they marked on a curve. So you take a test, and there was you'd end up with a score, and I was scoring like 180 or 170 on that test, and I always, when I went to school, 100 was the best. So I asked the instructor, why the score? So you're graded on a curve, so the top guy was getting a high score, and the bottom guy was getting a low score. But I thought the tests were relatively easy, as long as you did your work. And I don't recall any homework as such. Just went to class every day and did whatever they told you to do. And at the end of a segment, you took a test, and the guys who didn't do too well weren't back there the next week.
So what was an average day in country?
When I first got there, we worked 5 days, Monday through Friday, and then on Saturdays we did a lot of maintenance work on the equipment. And we'd get up maybe 6 o'clock, go to breakfast, and I think we probably would go to the compound where we worked maybe 8 o'clock, come back and look at submissions. Whatever happened to be coming in, you'd read the mission out. One guy would look at the photos, another guy would plot them on the map. So every 5 photos, you'd plot them on a map. If you saw something, you'd read the coordinates and put it into a little report. We'd go back into the city of Da Nang to where we ate lunch for an hour. Then we'd go back out to the compound and work till maybe 4, 5 o'clock at night. Come back for supper, change into civilian clothes. And there was an EM club down the street from where we were living at the time, and you could eat there if you wanted, or you eat in the commissary. And sometimes they would bring in bands, and you'd spend till 11 o'clock when the place closed, and then go back to the hotel where you're living, and the next day would start all over again.
Were there any dangers in going off base at the time?
Well, we lived right in the city. We lived in a hotel. You didn't really want to walk around too much in the city because you never knew what was going to happen. If you walked from the hotel to where we ate when I first got there, it was maybe a 5-minute walk. After about 6 months, we had to leave that hotel. We went into a Marine barracks just up the street from where we were, and we spent maybe another 6 months there. And then the last 4 or 5 months that I was there, we ended up in another hotel in the southern part of the city. And we had vehicles to get you back and forth, and as long as you stayed along the main drags, I thought it was relatively safe.
Did you carry weapons?
After Tet, I carried a weapon. Before that, we had weapons, but rarely carried them. After Tet, things got a little bit scarier.
I can imagine. We'll come back to that later.
Okay.
So when you first arrived in country, where did you land?
I landed in Benoit, and I think most people were coming into Benoit because there was a big replacement center there. So I spent a couple days in the replacement center waiting for orders. And then I got orders to go, I think, to the first MIBAR's headquarters. That's MIB parentheses ARS, which was Military Intelligence Battalion, Aerial Reconnaissance and Support. So the main headquarters was in Saigon. So several of us were sent there, and from there they sent you out to different detachments. There were 4 detachments. I got sent to Detachment B, was in Da Nang. I think we flew probably from Tanzania up into Da Nang. And once you got into the air base in Da Nang, somebody from the detachment picked you up and brought you into the compound, and they signed you up and gave you your weapon and brought you to the hotel and said, this is what you're going to be doing for the next 12 months or whatever. So I flew up, I think, with, I remember one other fellow that I flew up with. And there were a couple other guys from my time at Fort Holabird. Well, it was interesting when I was in Fort Holabird, after we all graduated from the class, they picked, I think, 5 of us for a psychological testing. And we went to, I think, Fort Monroe in Virginia. And we're housed there for a week, and they bring us into Washington, D.C. And I think it was a psychological test where we were looking at photos and working individually to identify items, and then they'd have us working as a team to see if you could identify more items. So I think there was some testing at that point. And then I remember they also brought you into a control room where they were using a computer to test you. So it was, if you identify, they gave you a scenario, and then they asked questions, and if you answered a question right, they brought you to the next question. And if you answered that right, they brought you to the next question. But if you answered it wrong, they sort of looped you back again. So I think it was, initially was trying to decide whether a computer would be helpful in designing the coursework. So we got to Vietnam a week or two after the other people. And we got a month's leave. Once we graduated, we got a month's leave. So I came home to Hartford. I think that was in the end of May 1967. And then I think I had to report out to Oakland Air Force Base sometime in mid-June. And then from there, we were waiting for a plane to take us over to Vietnam.
Did you have any layovers on your way to Vietnam?
We stopped 2 places. I think one was the Philippines, and I can't remember. The other one might have been Okinawa or Guam. And Hawaii, we stopped at Hawaii. And these were only a couple hours. So I saw Hawaii at night and saw Diamond Head from the airport, and that was it. And we just flew on. I think it was the Philippines we ended up at. And again, that was just an Air Force base until they refueled, and then you hopped on the plane again.
Did you get issued, besides a weapon when you landed, did you get issued any other kind of special equipment?
Nope.
And did they issue you a sidearm, or were you?
No, just we had an M14 and a clip of ammo, and that was it. So you said that life on base changed after that. Well, the workload certainly increased. We went from 5 days a week, basically reviewing photos. Like an 8-hour day we worked. Then we switched to it was either 18 hours on and 12 off, or 12 and 12, and we'd work 7 days a week. And also they brought in some extra staff, because at that time we got a contingent, I think, of Michigan National Guarders that came in. So we probably doubled the size of the unit at that point.
And this would all be tactical photo reconnaissance?
Yep.
So what kind of things were you looking for?
Well, we'd look at infiltration routes, foxholes, any sign of enemy activity. Certainly if something hot was going on, like Khe Sanh, we had a lot of missions around Khe Sanh, and again, you were looking for infiltration, emplacements, bunkers, anything you could see.
Were these coordinates be related to tactical air support?
A lot of it was what they called operational planning. Before TET came along, certainly a lot of it was operational planning, so they'd fly over a specific area where they were going to send in either a patrol or some type of operation, and you were just trying to see what you could see, what might be down there, and then report it through our headquarters, and then I assume it went to people higher up who were actually doing the planning.
So what were the
Well, you could see foxholes. You could see machine gun emplacements. You might see what looked like bunkers or storage areas. You could certainly see trails because if there's a lot of activity on a trail, it would change, the ground would become harder and it would appear white. So you'd see white, that would be the trail. So you'd try and see where the trail led and you'd report that there's heavy activity on the trail. If you might see some tire tracks, so you could report that there's vehicular traffic going there. On rare occasions, you might see a vehicle park. You wouldn't see masses of people. If you were in more of a coastal area, you might see a string of foxholes along a road. If the foxhole appeared brighter on the film, a lot wider, you knew they were fresher. So you'd report that back, and whoever was reviewing these reports would match it up with, let's say, something they'd already had reported on the map. If that it wasn't there, they'd know it was new. Now, we didn't know whether it was enemy stuff or it might have been, let's say, our guys who had laid over a night. So you tend to see more in the coastal areas because it was clear. Once you got into the jungle area, it was triple canopy. And a lot of times the only way you could find out where a piece of film was you'd see a part of a river. So let's say it was a loop. You could find that on a map so you'd know where that was. But there were some missions that we couldn't find anything. It was all over jungle and there was no discernible characteristics to plot anything. So you didn't see anything on those.
Now, how old were these photographs when you were doing them?
A day, in most cases. Some days a little bit less.
And if we can get into the technical aspects, do you recall what kind of film you were shooting on, or the magnification?
It was regular. What we would look at would be black and white transparencies. And I think the smallest scale, or maybe the highest scale, was 1 to 500. And you could see people and faces on that. The largest scale was 1 to 50,000. And you couldn't see anything on that. So 1 to 50,000 is 1 foot on a piece of film is 50,000 feet on the ground, which is basically 10 miles. So you couldn't see much. Most of the stuff we looked at was 1 to 5,000, which was a good scale to be looking at photos.
Now, how did that sort of voyeuristic approach to the war impact your perception of what was going on around you at the time?
Really didn't. I mean, it was a job that I was doing. We'd go through this and do the best we could to see what we could find, knowing that whatever we reported was going to go higher up and had some useful purpose. It didn't really bring us into any contact with people as such. The only time we really had real people contact is the unit also had a handheld camera program where somebody would go up in a little airplane and they'd fly over an area and take pictures with a little handheld camera. I didn't do any of those. One of the interesting things is after I got back home, there was an article in the Hartford Courant about a local guy, a local pilot who had been shot down and rescued. The pilot was, I think, from Putnam, Connecticut. The guy he was with was one of the guys in my unit who was on one of these handheld missions. So wasn't, it could be dangerous.
So, now you mentioned off camera that some of the operations were shooting infrared film.
We had infrared film. We had SLAR, which is side-looking airborne radar. So that would pick up moving objects. And we looked at, we had camouflage detection and regular black and white. When I was there in my what we're looking at, most of it was just the black and white transparencies with some camouflage detection and very little of the infrared or the airborne radar. Now, another interesting thing is they also had a camera angle, which was an oblique camera angle. So instead of looking straight down, you would look like forward. So that was set up so that you could perhaps look under trees and look under something, so you had a greater chance of seeing bunkers.
How effective was it?
If you got close, it wasn't bad. You could see it if you were far away. If the camera angle was far away, you couldn't see that much. And we didn't see too much of that either.
Now, what were the most significant images that you came across during the service?
Khe-Sanh was the big issue then. We'd see 10 film runs a day, if not more. And right when Khe-Sanh was going on, there was also a special forces camp called Lang Vei, which was, I guess, right next to the Laotian border, which was overrun. And that camp was overrun by tanks, which I think was the first time North Vietnamese tanks were used in the war. And you could see a couple of knocked out tanks in the wires. And then the other interesting thing about Khe-Sanh was when I think it was an airborne division was coming across Route 9. And they were going to open up the road and relieve the siege. You could watch the airborne make its way there.
Yeah, how did that feel to watch the Battle of Khe-Sanh unfold in 24 hours?
Well, that was interesting because you could see trenches come closer and closer and come through the wires, and at the end of the trench you'd see a machine gun emplacement. And the other interesting thing was to see Khe-Sanh going from a jungled area surroundings to just moonscapes because of the B-52 bombing runs. And you'd see a moonscape, and between the bomb craters you'd see a trail where people would be infiltrating to get closer to the base. So that was an interesting time.
Now, you also mentioned that you surveyed images of Hue City.
We saw a lot of Hue City. That was difficult to interpret because a lot of the fighting was in and around buildings, and you really couldn't see all of that much. It wasn't like you could see infiltration routes. There was a lot of rubble. It seemed like a pretty city before it was knocked down. So there was a lot of photos over there, but I don't think we really reported all that much because of the difficulty of finding anything.
Was it trying to detect objects in an urban area just totally new to you?
It was new. Certainly was, it was like a regular city. It was a little bit different than some of the coastal regions because you might have had a lot of development along the road, but then you got into rice paddies. But Hue was a lot of rubble, and you just couldn't see much there. I mean, you couldn't even see your own units.
So what was it like in Da Nang?
Well, it was interesting because Da Nang was one of the first cities that was attacked. And it was attacked the night before Tet started. And from what I've read in various publications, was Tet was originally supposed to go off, I think, on January 30th, the attack. And it was called off, but there were some units apparently didn't get the word. And a unit attacked the I-Corps compound, which is where we worked. They attacked in the middle of the night. And I'm not sure how many people got in there. Probably a dozen were killed in there. And when we went in the next morning, we went in with sort of battle gear, flak jackets, and they were fighting right outside the walls in a little village right behind us. And you could hear the sounds of battle, and what was interesting is they had Skyhawk airplanes at the time. I think they were the Vietnamese, and they were dropping some of the bigger bombs in the village. I think the battle lasted up until noon, and once it was over, they tended to drag all the bodies out to a helicopter pad right across the street from where we were. Left them out there a day or two for people to look at. Because there are a lot of people who went from our village were walking into the city. So I think it was out there for people to see. And then after that, we started standing guard duty, which we had never done before. I think on Tet, the next night there was rumors or some thought that the Viet Cong were going to land in this fishing village behind where we were living, come through us and attack the Da Nang Hotel, which was where a lot of Air Force were and where our clubs were and where we ate. And so we were out on listening post, but nothing happened.
Did you ever see combat?
No, I didn't.
And was there anybody from your unit injured fighting on the night?
No. There was one fella that I served with who was killed in an accident, but had nothing to do with combat. I think there was one or two fellas in a different detachment who were killed during Tet, but not in my unit.
What was the emotional climate?
I think, the night we expected the Viet Cong to come through us to go to the Da Nang Hotel. I mean, I was scared. I think other people were scared, and I certainly was scared the first time the air base was rocketed and didn't know what to do, and grabbed my weapon and said, "We ain't going anywhere." But for us, it was relatively safe, and other than for the couple days around Tet, I didn't feel too unsafe. The only time I really had any hesitation is once we started working nights, we had to, a lot of times we had to go from the compounds back into the city, and you were driving alone, and you had some hesitation, but nothing ever happened.
At that point, did you start training a weapon on your person?
Yes, once Tet started, I took a weapon from where we lived into the compound and back. But several guys did, some didn't. Never needed it. And the what I was always concerned with, because you read about this and hear about it, is some little kid or some guy would throw a grenade in the back of your truck with 20 guys on it. And, that's what I was always looking at. And the joke was who they were going to push on top of it to get the Medal of Honor. So during the day it was safe. At night you'd be a little bit more worried.
Was your unit taken completely by surprise when the compound was attacked?
Yep, because
What was your immediate reaction to hearing all this?
well, a lot of people wanted to rush down there and defend the compound. My reaction was, that's other people's jobs. I'll wait till it's over. I mean, I was not in a rush to go into combat, but I think people were, scared. They were on their guard because didn't know what was going to happen. And then after that, it was back to work as normal. And the night times were a little bit more chancy because the people who were providing security for us were the South Vietnamese, and they didn't have a good reputation. As a matter of fact, I think when we gave our reports into our people, a copy went to the Vietnamese because we were right next to each other, and I'm sure those reports went right out to the Viet Cong, and I think we could have just eliminated the middleman and mailed it right to the Viet Cong.
Did you ever have any interaction with Republican career forces? Any rocks on base?
They weren't, we've seen, they were in the EM club occasionally, and you'd see them around, but, I mean, we didn't live on a base. We lived in a hotel, and when we went to work, we were in the I-Corps headquarters, so there wasn't a lot of South Vietnamese there. It was, basically the headquarters. And I would say the place was probably a half mile by a half mile in size. It wasn't a big place.
What were the accommodations like in the hotel?
First hotel was 2 or 3 people per room. You had hot water from like 4 o'clock to 4:30. So if you didn't get back in time, you had a cold shower or no shower. There was a well in the back, and if you really wanted to take a bath, you'd use the well. It was just a place to sleep. We had probably 40 guys living there, and we had the whole hotel, I think 2-story. And then the next hotel that we'd worked in was, I think, 3 stories, 2 people per room. They had fans and indoor plumbing, and very nice. It beat a barracks.
How was the Marine barracks there?
The Marine barracks weren't bad. We had a barracks, just our people, and the Marines were in another building, and they provided security. It was like living in basic training there at Fort Holabird. The water you wouldn't want to drink, but you did have showers, and as long as you didn't mind the bugs coming out of the water, it wasn't bad. We were in bunks, and different people had little miniature TVs and tape decks, and you could watch Armed Forces TV or listen to Armed Forces radio. But we spent most of our time off duty at the EM club, having adult libations and listening to a band or whatnot.
Yeah, it sounds like you advanced through the enlisted ranks pretty quickly.
We did.
Getting to E5 in 2 years is impressive.
Well, I think I made private first class out of Fort Holabird, and made E4 relatively quickly once you spent some time there, and then E5 I think I made in like 17 months, and that sort of became the working grade. If you wanted to go to E6, you usually had to re-enlist. But that was the working grade. Once you got to E5, you became a team leader. So you'd have a team of 3 or 4 guys working in one of the vans, reading out the missions. And in another van, you'd have another E5 or an E6 with another team. And we had 3 vans, so we usually had 3 teams going at one time. And you had enough missions to keep you going, especially after TET. And a lot of the missions, you'd have anywhere from, let's say, 500 to 2,500 negatives on a run. So you'd have, if you had most of the film again that we're looking at, the one 5001 was 18 inches wide, 9 inches high. So if you're looking at 2,500 of them, you're looking at 3/4 of a mile of film. And once you get through that one, you got another one coming.
So what was the sorting process like when you got, pilot between 500 meters?
Well, it was all on a roll of film, so it all came on a spool. So you'd have one spool of, let's say, 500 or 2,500. The first one would tell you where it went and what the scale was, and you just roll through the film, plotting every 5th negative, so that if you found something, you'd know where it was on the map, and you'd just go through looking, see what you could find.
How long would it take you to normally evaluate?
If it was a lot of jungle, it might be half hour to an hour, sometimes more. If it was something that you were specifically looking for? If they told you there was something they particularly wanted you to look for, you'd spend more time on it. If it was 5,000 to 1 or 50,000 to 1, at 50,000 to 1, you could go through it pretty fast because you couldn't really. It was more a real general operational type of mission that they had.
Now, did you ever do any bomb damage assessment?
Not that I can recall. The only time I can recall looking at any damage assessment was when the Special Forces camp was overrun. It was overrun at night, and they flew missions over it the next morning.
What is it? And you said there's a few knocked out.
There are some, I think there were PT-76 tanks and, pardon?
I was thinking swimming tanks.
No, they were, tanks, Army tanks. And they were coming through the wire, and they were knocked out during the battle, and they were just sitting out there in the wire. And I don't know why, you were probably trying to see what was left of the Special Forces camp, and maybe see if there was anybody that was signaling for help in some way or manner. And then you reported what you saw. Everything was really basically demolished. So I think that was really the only bomb damage assessment we saw. The only other thing that we might take a look at is there was a major infiltration route coming down in the northern part. It was called the Ashaw Valley, and there was a lot of B-52 missions there trying to knock out the road. So you'd report what was left of the road and whether there were any new trails or any new vehicle tracks that you saw. But you'd knock off. They'd bomb the place, and the next morning they'd fill in the bomb craters so they'd a road again. So we went over there quite a bit.
Now, were you awarded any medals or citations?
I had the Army Commendation Medal, Good Conduct, Vietnamese Medal of Honor, second class, which was comparable to Army Commendation. And then the unit had, when I was there, the unit was awarded, I think, 4 meritorious unit citations and 1 presidential unit citation. So that was an indication of the work that we had done. So I guess those are the ones that I'm proudest of.
So, were you ever wounded?
No.
Okay. And now I guess we're coming back to your day-to-day experience. How did you stay in touch with your family?
Letters, send letters back and forth. I was writing maybe once a week. I'd write to my parents, occasionally to my brother. And they would send care packages. They were sending Hartford Currents, keep up with the local news, and packages of food. And,
Special request?
Fruitcake. Claxton fruitcake. I still love them. That was good because nobody else liked them, so you didn't have to share the fruitcakes.
Did you feel like you were well supplied?
Yeah. And it wasn't, again, living in Da Nang, we had a commissary which was well stocked, and we got a meal allowance. We had to buy all of our meals. So we bought breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and I think we were getting $75 a month for meal allowance. And if you bought every meal, it might have cost you $65. Breakfast was like $25, and supper was $1. And Saturday nights was the big meal night. You had a choice of steak or lobster for $2.
How'd you like the indigenous food?
Didn't eat it. Didn't want to eat out on a local economy. If you watched how they made it, and the sanitation wasn't something that I was going to try.
Now, so So what was the food like? So the food in the commissary was good.
It was great. It was, I think it was probably coming from the Navy. I mean, we had real milk, real ice cream. I mean, it was better than I was eating at home. First time I had ever had rice, I think, was there. Because we always had potatoes at home. And I liked the rice. I mean, I gained like 25 pounds from when I got there to when I left. And a lot of it, I think, was the food, and the rest was the alcohol.
So, did you ever have to have sea rations?
We had sea rations at night, sometimes when we were working at night, but I wasn't fond of them. I would either eat the pound cake or the fruit, but wasn't. We were well fed, so that was more of a snack, and didn't have a lot of it around.
Do you ever feel pressure or stress while performing your duty?
I think we were pressured, and certainly after TET started to meet the workload of the missions. Before TET, there were down times where, you know, with all of the people around that all of the photo interpreters, you wasn't all that busy. But once TET started, you were overwhelmed with the number of missions. So, you know, it was a stress to get the missions read and get the reports out. And again, we went from like an 8-hour day for the unit to 24 hours, 7 days a week.
Now, how did you get through it? You know, did you have any coping mechanisms you used to deal with that time?
No, I just thought it was a good job to have, and I enjoyed doing it. And I mean, I enjoyed my time there. I thought it was a good adventure, and was happy to do it, and you know, glad to go home. But you know, again, at the time, I had no direction in life, and it was a nice job to have, and I thought I was doing something that was worthwhile.
So, is there anything you did special for good luck while you were overseas?
Nope. I didn't think we needed good luck. Because we didn't have any real bad luck. I mean, to me, it was a day-to-day job, and every day you knew you were going to leave where you were living and drive through the city down to where you were working, and you were going to look at missions and make reports, and you're going to do the same thing the next day. So.
How did you entertain yourself?
I did a lot. Yeah, we had an EM club, so after work we'd go there. We'd go have supper, and then you could go upstairs to the EM club. I forget which floor that was on in the hotel, but on the roof of the hotel they also had movies. I won't say they were first-run movies, but they weren't that old, so maybe twice a week or 3 times a week you could see a movie. And then at the EM club, they brought in different bands who were playing the Asian circuit, I guess. A lot of them were Vietnamese and Asian, and they could sing the American songs. And I think they were sort of lip-syncing them because phonetically singing them. But that was nice. They would always get a big crowd there for those nights. And at 11 o'clock, the place would close up, and you'd go back to where you were staying. And it was all EM, whether it was Air Force or Army and Marines occasionally. And it was interesting when a lot of the Marines were coming out of the field, and you had to be a member of the club to get in. And so you'd see some of them at the door asking, can you come in with them? So you'd sign them in, and when you signed them in, the guy at the door would take your card in case something happened. So you'd tell the Marines that I'm letting you in, just don't get into any fights, because that means you're going to be out and we're going to be out. So just enjoy yourself and have fun. And I don't ever recall anybody ever getting into fights there. There may have been when I wasn't there, but everybody behaved themselves. And
never did anybody from E1 up going there?
Anyone from E1 up through E9, I guess. I think they did have an NCO club, maybe on another floor, but I think E1s through E5s were there, and the officers had their own place somewhere else in the city.
Once you made it E4, did you ever start going
Actually, I didn't even know there was one until a reunion that we had a couple of years ago, and I saw the picture that there was an NCO club. So.
Now, when you talk about entertainers, did you ever see any American entertainers, any USO shows?
We saw the 1967 Bob Hope show.
What was that like?
Well, what was interesting is we went to work that morning. Yeah, I don't know, about 10 o'clock, somebody said, come on, we're all going to get into a truck and we're going to see Bob Hope. So we left the compound where we were working and took a drive to I think it was the western side of the Da Nang Air Base, a place called Freedom Hill where they had a theater and a big hillside. So we got there and I think we were probably at least a half a mile away, standing on a ledge, and you were looking down to the stage, and people looked like ants. But it was a nice show, enjoyable. I don't know how many people were there. There were thousands and thousands of people there. And I'm not sure who he had. He might have had Raquel Welch there, and his normal band. But that was a nice, enjoyable show. And then from there we went back to work. And then we had the normal shows that came to the EM Club. That was the only show that I ever saw, other than at an EM Club.
So, did you ever get any active duty R&R?
Yep. Near the end of my tour, I went to Penang, Malaysia, a little island off the coast of Malaysia.
How was that?
I thought it was great. Again, you were in civilian clothes. We got to tour the island, went with a couple other guys from the unit, and we spent, I think, 5 days there, and came back and took some pictures, and it was a very nice trip. We did what the normal GIs did, whatever that might have been.
Now,
and the interesting thing was I was so near the end of my tour. This was, I think, in June of '68, and and by then I had a year. I had already done a year. And there were only, I think I wanted to go to Australia, but it wasn't open. The only thing that was open that late in the tour was Penang. That's why I ended up in Penang. And I'm glad I went. Because you got to see more Oriental culture. So they had you could see a lot of the Orient there. And when I was in Vietnam, before I got up to Da Nang, you did some processing in Saigon. And I took a tour of Saigon with another fellow. We got into a pedicab and they took us to different spots. And so I got to really like the Oriental culture because it was so different from the Western culture.
Was it the first time you'd ever been exposed to it?
Yeah, yeah.
So, what was it that you appreciated so much about it?
It was totally different from I grew up in Hartford. The farthest I had ever been with my family was Boston and New York. Never traveled anywhere. And then going to see, the temples and just a totally different culture, and seeing how the other half of the world lives. I just found it fascinating, and I still do.
Did you ever return to Asia after the war?
My wife and I took a vacation in Japan. And we went on a Yukon tour, spent 7 or 8 days there. And I'd like to go back at some point in time, but probably never will.
Now, do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events that happened in service? Any kind of absurd event?
Sure, there were plenty of them. Well, there was one event, I guess it was sort of absurd. What we used to do with the film after a couple of weeks is we would burn it because it was all classified. So we'd take all of this film and throw it in the back of a 2.5-ton truck, and 2 guys would then take it, and we'd go outside of the city a couple miles to this dump. We'd have to unravel all of the film, and if you're unraveling miles and miles of film by hand, it took you a while. So we'd unravel it off the back of this deuce-and-a-half truck, and we'd have a big pile of film. And to burn it, we'd have a 5-gallon can of gasoline, and we put it all over in the film, and then somebody would light something up and throw it onto the film, and it would, you know, sort of blow up and would burn. Well, one day we did that too soon, and we hadn't moved the truck. So the truck almost caught fire, and we were probably 5 miles out of the city in more of a dangerous area where we actually had action at times, and we didn't want to be there without a truck. Another time was when I first got there. I had to go out with another fellow who'd been there a little bit more, and we took a deuce-and-a-half. We had to fill up sandbags because we were building bunkers. So he went out, crossed the river, went over to the beach, because we were right on the South China Sea. And he drove right out on the beach, and we filled up sandbags and threw them all in the truck. And I don't know how many sandbags we had. We spent a couple hours, and it was starting to get dark. And he says, "Okay, it's time to go." And we had the truck so loaded with sandbags we couldn't get off the beach. So what do we do now? Well, there are some Vietnamese kids around. So we threw the sandbags off, a lot of the sandbags off the truck, so that we could get it off the beach and onto the road. And we paid the Vietnamese kids to truck the sandbags up, and we threw them on. So. But there are a lot of funny things that I can't recall at the moment.
Do you remember any pranks that you were for?
No, I don't actually. I really don't. It's interesting. The unit has a website. If you go up on the web, it's First My Bars, and different people have written in and provided some memories. And I had written up a lot of memories, so there may be some anecdotes from there, and it's open to the public. So
what did you think of the officers and the
loved the people that I worked with. Didn't have a lot of contact with the officers. I recall, I think it was a major that was running the show, and he'd spend his time in the office, and we were in expandable vans, so saw very little of the officers. I think we had a couple of warrant officers who were flying some of the planes that would go between Da Nang and the different detachments to pick up film. And we had most of our contact were with the sergeants who were, running the day-to-day stuff, and they were all good except one of them that people didn't really think highly of. I'm not sure I want to use the word on camera, but he was not felt highly of. And the officers lived in a separate villa somewhere in the city, so we wouldn't see them other than if you showed up at work, or if you had a formation and they wanted to address you at some point in time. But other than that, no real contact with them.
So did you keep a journal while you were in service?
No. I did. I was writing to a girl in Idaho. This was she was a high school girl, and she had written a letter to any serviceman, and I picked it up at one of the USOs and started writing. And she kept all of her letters. And eventually met her because she came to New Haven to work, and we met and kept in contact. And I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, she sent me all of the letters that I wrote her. And I read through them, and it was just day to day what's happening, and it was just interesting as to what you talked about.
Do you still have those letters?
No, I sent them back to her. And she also, I think I had sent her pictures that I had had taken when I was on R&R, which I didn't have, and a couple of years ago she sent me those. So some of the pictures that are on the slides of R&R, that's where I got those from.
So, do you remember where you were the day your service ended?
Well, when I left Vietnam, I know we were flying out of Da Nang. We went to the replacement depot again in Bien Hoa, waiting for a plane out. And they flew us to Japan was a stop, Alaska was a stop, and then we flew to Fort Dix. And I think we got there in the morning, and we processed out by that night. So that was my last day in the service, and I got, I think I got $11 travel allowance to get home to Hartford. It cost me more than that to get a bus off the base to Philadelphia to get home. No, I'll tell you an interesting, humorous story. When you were getting out, you had to take a urine test and an eye test and a hearing test. So I'm standing in this long line of people waiting to get into these hearing booths. And I see a sergeant walking up the line. He's leaning in to people coming up the line, and every so often somebody leaves the line. And he comes up to me and he mumbled something, and I said, "What?" And he says, "Stay in line." So 15, 20 minutes later, he's coming up again. He's saying something to people. Some people are leaving, some people are staying. As he's coming up, I read his lips. He says, "Can you hear me?" So when he got to me, he mumbled that, and I said, "Yes." And he said, "That's it. That's how I passed my hearing test to get out." So I guess that was their means of efficiency. So once I left base, I went to Philadelphia, pick up a bus, took it to Boston, spent a couple days in Boston, and then just took it home and came home and got a job working for a landscaper until I got back into school in the spring semester. And then from there I spent 3.5 years getting a degree.
Did you folks meet you in Hartford?
No, I walked, they didn't have a car, so I walked from the bus station home a mile or so, and was used to walking because that's what I did when I was growing up. I just knocked on the door because I didn't have a key.
I'm sure they were.
Well, my mother was, I guess, certainly. I think mothers are more glad than fathers. But, you know, they're glad to see me home. And I was glad to be home.
And what did you do in the, well, you got a job landscaping and, went back to school. Was your education supported by the GI Bill?
Yep. I had 33 months worth of benefits. It was a month and a half for every month of active duty that I had. So that paid me $125 a month as long as I kept up 12 credits or more. So that certainly when I was going to the Hartford branch of UConn, $125 a month made money for me because there was no tuition and no room and board. I just had to pay $60 or $70 a month for fee, or a semester for fees plus my books. So I made money the first couple of years until I had to go up to stores, and then once I had to stay up there and start paying room and board, got me through until the last semester. So the GI Bill worked out well for me.
Did you make any close friendships while you were in service?
I did when I was there. Once I left, I had contact with only one fella by phone for a couple of years. Then we lost touch, and the next time I had any contact was I had a call out of the blue a couple of years ago from a fella who was trying to set up a reunion. And he just called my house, and I was in Florida at the time, and left a message. My wife took the message in Florida, said, "You might want to call this guy. He looking for somebody from my bar. So I listened to the message, and this guy talked about looking for Gene Pianka, who had been in the service, and if the word my bars meant anything to you, just give him a call. And I thought about it for a while, and finally I did call him and made contact with him, and eventually ended up having a reunion in I think 2008. And I met 10 or 12 guys that I had actually served with. And that was nice to see these people. First time in 40 years that I had any contact with them.
Now you continue to make those relationships since?
Well, we had a second reunion that I went to, and haven't really. I mean, so the contacts have been through the reunion, but other than that, no.
There's the unit website.
Yeah.
So what did you want to do as a career after your service?
I ended up with an accounting degree, and my first job after college is I was an auditor for one of the big 8 CPA firms at the time, and we audited public accounts and private accounts, and my specialty ended up in municipal audits. And I worked for them for 4 years, and then I got a job as the first finance director for the town of Rocky Hill, Connecticut, and worked for them for 14 years. And then after that, I became the finance director for the New Britain School District, and worked there for 19 years until I retired in 2010.
Now, how was the military and your military experience influenced the way you think about war or about the military in general?
Well, I'm certainly proud of my service, proud of the people who do serve. I guess I don't have a lot of thoughts about war other than I feel sorry for the people who are in it, and really feel sorry for the veterans who get hurt, but proud of them and really look up to them.
Did you go on to join any veterans organizations?
After about 25 years after I got out, I did join the VFW, and I'm a life member. It's interesting, the way I joined that was I was thinking about it, and at the time my son was in the Cub Scouts, and the 2 Cub Scout leaders were World War II veterans, and I think they were in the VFW, or I had asked them about the VFW, and they said, "Oh, gee, one of them's the treasurer and the other one's the secretary," and I joined a post in Wethersfield at the time, so that's how I got into that.
So how has your service affected your life?
It makes me extremely proud of my country, proud of my service. I think one of the things that stayed with me was the concept of working as a part of a team, and not being an I guy or a me guy, but to be part of a team and to get your results as part of a team.
Now, is there anything that's come to mind during the interview, or anything you feel we haven't covered that you'd like to add?
Not really. I guess the only thing that I'd say is I wanted to make my father proud.
Which I'm sure you have.
Well, we never talked about it, but I'm sure he was.
So, Mr. Pianka, on behalf of the Veterans History Project, I'd like to thank you for your military service, and as an American, I'd like to say welcome home.
Thank you.